Um, From then on to anything I can go over for you?
As for me,
Okay.
it's pretty self-explanatory.
Well, maybe not for everyone, so I'm gonna dig in a little bit. and see.
Okay.
Should kick the video. Says I'm sending, yeah, good. So I want to go over a couple things just as a reminder. I did mention it in the announcement, but this week we're doing something where the right hand is playing in 8-1. Right hand plays the melody exactly as written, and then the left hand is playing the chords. And for the most part, it's pretty straight ahead, but just be very careful. Note that's notated in the bass clef is the top note of your chord voicing. So just as an example, we're kind of giving it to you as a guide. So if it's an F triad, then that could be root position, and the C triad is going to be first inversion because the notation shows the middle C, and then the D minor, you're going to wind up there, and then A minor, and any of these fingerings. And as you play the chords, just again, keep in mind your hand is in on the keyboard, so it's easy enough to navigate. And with a little bit around this, the finger links are more manageable if you. So if it's an F triad, then that could be root position, and the C triad is going to be first inversion because the notation shows the middle C, and then the D minor, you're going to wind up there, and then A minor. Any of these fingerings, and as you play the chords, just again, keep in mind your hand is in on the keyboard, so it's easy enough to navigate. And with a little bit around this, the finger links are more manageable if you keep your hand in that position. So there's no specific combination of fingers that we use for chords. It usually can be one or two different fingerings, and also depends on where you're coming from. So F, I can play 1, 2, 4, and then C becomes 1, 3, 5, or 5, 3, 1, depending on how you're looking at it. The D minor, I could move the whole thing up, and then A minor, I could keep the A with the third finger, or if it's more comfortable, go back to 1, 2, 5. Anything like that is going to work fine. The thing I always suggest is determine how you want to finger it and then stick with it every time you play the piece. So your brain and your body develops this, just memory pattern of muscle memory that helps you articulate everything easily so you don't have to think so much. The B flat, just make sure you move in. I think third finger or second finger is fine. The B flat triad, it shows the D. So that's what's happening in the left hand. I think the right hand is maybe the more difficult part when you get to the second line, and that you've got all of these shapes. And there's a few different ways of handling it. And one thing, it doesn't navigate the fingering quite the same as you may end up doing, but one thing I think is helpful is to play the notes as a group so you get the basic shape of where your hand needs to be. So it's an F triad. If you look at the 4/8 notes, A, C, F, A, it's an F triad, just like the chord symbol shows. So the chord symbols should help you in terms of determining what the notes are, and they should work together. So if you see you're playing a note like if you're playing an E flat on the C triad, it should kind of ring a bell that you must be playing a wrong note because the C triad has an E natural on it. So it's nice to see those chord symbols and really relate to what notes you're playing and make sure that that they're in agreement. So if you practice a little bit, you might want to play the triad as a group of notes, and then the C, and the D minor, and then the A minor, and then D flat, and that gets you used to getting your hand in the position. So what? See if I can. I guess it's doing the iPad thing. One thing that makes it easier is if you get your hand in position, so you're not moving, that's the problem. You're not moving every time you play a note. So the more you can think of groups of notes and, get the hand in position to play that whole group, the easier it is to navigate. So here I'm using some different fingering. So as I'm coming down, I have 5, and then 4, and then here I'd probably use 3 on the E, and that sets me up for the 4th, and then maybe 3, 5, 4, 3, 5, 4, and then same thing, 3, 5, 1, and then maybe 3. And I think it's helpful if you put the fingering in the piece, and like I said, once you've determined what fingering you want to use, stick with it, because we can learn all sorts of movements that are extremely difficult and challenging at first, but if we repeat them over and over the same way, it makes learning much easier because your body learns the muscle memory and it learns what it feels like to move, and that's a major, component of actually performing on an instrument. The muscle memory that happens, so you're not thinking from note to note, you're not thinking, little details, you're thinking just big picture, how does this sound, am I playing, articulate, am I playing with the right dynamic, and all those other things come into play when you're not thinking about what's the note that I have to play, because you become so automatic in your performance, which takes a long time, but once you get there, it makes everything much easier. The second piece is just chord symbols and a melody. So there's not one right answer, but the one thing to keep in mind is just be careful with the note ranges you choose with chords. You're going to need to play them obviously below where the melody is. So A with an F chord, but I could play F in first inversion here, forward position, and then we want to make sure you voice lead the chord. So we didn't give you a guide, but the idea is you're not jumping all over the keyboard. You're going, well, if I play F, A, C as the F triad, then A minor, all I need to do is move the F down to E, and I have the A minor. B flat, every note's going to have to move, but you can move just a little bit. So the A moves up to B flat, the C moves up to D, and then moves down. Kind of down at an angle. Right. So voice leading from here, A minor is just have one note, and B flat is 2. Now I can choose the voice lead up to F, and then B flat, or I could go down to B flat, G minor, up to C, or down to C. So what we don't want is very disjointed. There's no exact answer to whether you want to move up or down. There's just a couple of considerations, and the main one, and the one we're always as musicians should be listening for, is just that. How does it sound? Do I like moving like that? That sounds better. So part of why it sounds better is because we get a little bit of contrary motion, and what you'll find is if you start studying more harmony and you study counterpoint, and if you're writing melodies and harmonizing things or orchestrating things, it generally works really well when you have voices that are not moving in exactly the same direction, and particularly like the bass note against the melody. So when you can have them move contrary, so I have the bass note going down or the lower note of the chord voicing going down, and then the melody goes up, and you get some contrary motion, it becomes more interesting for the listener. And it's a subtle thing, and I wouldn't expect everyone to be thinking about that as they're doing this, but it is something to be aware of, and that's why it sounds nice to drop the F down to the E and the melody moves up. And then the melody goes down, so for me I like moving up, so all the notes in the B flat chord move up, And it is a little bit dissonant because it's that major seven. Top two notes, they move down. And again, you can move up. But then sounds smooth. Maybe here. Now the melody moves down, so maybe I'll move up with the voicing. So I might go from G, so I root position G minor, maybe move up to G, C, E. Maybe down against the melody. So I have C in the melody and then C on top of the voicing, and then maybe up for the D minor. And then here, I could go either direction. Flat. So to me, maybe that's ideal because of the relationship against the melody, but for what we're asking you to do, as long as you get the right chord and there's some voice leading, it's fine. But ultimately, it's nice to think about why does this inversion maybe work a little better than another inversion? Because initially when you're learning the voice lead, it's usually we're trying to get you to move as little as possible. So you're not jumping all over the keyboard. But once you've achieved that, the idea is to create nice relationships with the melody and support it. So using the contrary motion approach is one thing, but also you can create some sort of counterpoint or additional melody, like a secondary melody will happen based on your voice leading. So if I play F to A to B flat with this top note, that creates a nice melody. Fourth, so sometimes you might choose the voice lead because of the secondary melody that's created as the top note of each chord moves, because it can stand out and create a nice balance against what the original melody is, or, the primary melody. So there's a lot of different considerations that we use as we voice lead all the chords. And that are those are the two things I wanted to talk about. So, Elena, how you doing? I see you popped up a video. Do you have any questions or anything I can go over?
Yeah, quick question. There is a word defect here in my practice this week because I can do the Canon D without the backtrack. When I put the backtrack, I don't know why this happens, But I keep trying. I try the right tempo, but when I try to play along with the backtrack, and then I mess up some notes. Strange.
What is it? I'm trying to think of what would be. Do you get a sense of what's causing that?
I think when I play just with piano, just by myself, I try to, because I love that song. It's more than 500 years song, and I try to do a little bit of interpretation, and then I get the wrong tempo in some specifically matters.
Yeah. Well, if you're familiar with it and you've played something before, sometimes you do develop habits that when you're in a different scenario, you do have to break them because you're so used to, like you said, interpreting it a certain way, and now all of a sudden you have to follow it. I would say, like I've said on other things, if you're having a problem with something, introduce it in small doses, meaning if you're having trouble maybe following the play along, do just the right hand with the play along and see if you can do that on its own. And then if that feels like that's come together, then try just the left hand. So you kind of get used to using the play along, but you're removing some of the difficulty by only doing one hand or the other. And then maybe after being able to do with the hands separately, you probably find that you could do it, with both hands, but do it in small steps, small chunks.
Okay.
That's interesting. Is it the first one you've noticed that the play along seems more challenging?
Well, actually, I can play, separated our hands together, but when I use the backtrack, maybe I think I'm so close of the right tempo, but I'm not there. Maybe
Yeah. Yeah. But have you tried separate hands with the backing track?
Yes, so it goes smoothly.
Oh, it does. Well, that's good. So yeah, you've got to be really close then if you can do that. Well, the other thing that I use when I'm aiming for a particular tempo is find the tempo that's the goal. I don't remember what these tempos are exactly, but use a metronome. Go, okay, well, whatever it is, if it's 100, and then find the tempo that you can do it with a metronome slowly. So if it's like 75, then okay, well, 75, let's go to 78 or something. I can do that, and then just keep notching it up one notch at a time until you kind of hit the point where you crash, and then keep track of it. And then the next day, start stepping it up, and you find over a couple of days, usually you can get a little faster, a little faster. I still do stuff like that when I'm working on something really challenging. In part because I think a lot of us are impatient, and if I don't use that metronome, I tend to go ahead and play too fast and then make mistakes and rush and then crash. And
Yeah.
so it kind of holds you back, which is a good thing because you want to do it correctly every time.
But also this week happens a very, very good thing for me. I tried to play a song, Simple Man, and then I used this chord impression, and how quick I was able to get that song was very, satisfying for me. And I find that working with impressions, was, like also to sound like the original sound was, and then was basically what we were, was what we was learning last in the past
Yeah.
weeks. Was
Yeah.
very satisfying.
Well, that's good. I mean, the more language you learn with any of this, the more comfortable and the more quickly you're going to be able to develop the playing. So it's all really important foundational stuff.
I have one question.
Sure.
In the assignment 8.2, the number one thing for you is to make sure that the chords are, correctly done in terms of voice leading.
Mm-hmm.
But you've also given us the whether you want to call it the task or whatever, but the freedom to play with it. I mean, I could easily drop an octave on a chord, for example, but of course that wouldn't be exactly what you're looking for. Am I correct?
Yeah, I mean, I would start. That's what I was saying in terms of.
No, I
The
counted
voice
it all
freedom.
out, and I think I've got pretty much very little movement in my hand, which I think was what you're looking for. But then I realized that there was a lot of variation I could play with, including the most extreme would be dropping an octave, for example, which I don't think you're looking for. It would sound good to me, for example.
I think that well, the ranges play a really important role, and as you play on the piano, if you start playing triads much lower than, bottom note about an octave below middle C, it actually starts to get a little bit dark and muddy. So here, it's really not a clear texture. It can be useful for certain things, but if you were to drop the octave, in a lot of cases, I think it would sound really dark and muddy, and it wouldn't be a normal place that you hear someone playing the chords. So the ranges that are most common for harmony, when we're talking about, triads or seven chords within like a one-hand span, so we call them close position, meaning all the notes are within the octave, would be about C below middle C and G above middle C. That range on the piano is really the most common range for those close position chords. When you get higher, they don't sound dark and muddy, but they start to sound a little bit thinner. And
Yeah.
if you're just harmonizing something that, we tend to not do that. And then down here, it's really hard to even hear the individual notes. So again, it can be useful, like Beethoven, play those big dark chords sometimes too. But in the context of this pop tune, definitely the ranges would be, I would say, no lower than C below middle C. And the other thing is you have to stay below the melody, so that sort of limits the the top note of where you go.
Yeah. Okay. I get your point. All right.
And rhythmically, I think the other thing is, you could try something with some rhythmic variation, so when the melody's held, but the tune is so straight ahead that I think if you do too much, it just sounds like too much. I think it works in a pretty simple performance.
Okay.
On your own, and for trying different things, you could try some arpeggiations or some other chordal patterns. So like, just as a technical practice, or any kind of combination of patterns can sometimes work depending on the tune, or just trying quarter notes as a kind of like a pop.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I mean, those are things to try on your own, but I think for what we're looking for, you're right. We have kind of a narrow bandwidth of what we want. The thing where you have some freedom is specifics with the inversions.
Right. No, I understand that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Well, it looks like we're it. So,
Okay.
I'm gonna actually maybe do some grading. I'm a little behind. I get behind. We had where I live, I get about 14 inches of snow. So Monday morning, I'm usually in grading and doing some stuff, and it took me hours to dig out, and then I was in school late, so I'm a bit behind. So I'm gonna try to do some catch up with some of that too. But if anybody has any questions, you know how to get hold of me. Just shoot me a message, and otherwise, have a great week, and I'll talk to you next week.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. See you. Bye.